I think we need to get the message sent ASAP. He turned to talk to Marquez, and Chad began to quietly sidle away from them. He wasn't going back in that hold with those xenomorphs. As the other two Marines emerged from the Cheyenne, and Jones started barking orders at them, Chad seized his chance. He figured he was no good dead to them, so they'd probably not start shooting. Eyeing a narrow, natural path that afforded a decent chance at climbing the ravine over some patches of loose shale, he put his head down and set off at a run. "Sir," Marquez said. Jones turned to see McLaren disappearing behind a rocky outcrop. "The fucker." He glanced at the dropship and made a decision. "Okay, you go to the landing pad. Try to secure the comms tower, but do not get anyone killed. We can't afford to lose the man. I'll get McLaren and radio you when I've secured him. You can come and pick us up." Marquez twirled his finger in the air to get everyone else back on the Cheyenne, and Jones pulled out his pistol and went in pursuit of McLaren. Within 5 minutes, Segura had the Cheyenne lifting out of the ravine, and he turned the nose of the dropship back toward the colony buildings. Be good to go toe-to-toe with some of those buggy bastards. Interesting to see how they died. What sort of noise they made when they went. He liked killing stuff. That was why he joined the Colonial Marines. His ma wanted him to be a veterinarian when he was at school in Miami. Until that day she caught him dissecting the neighbor's cat, while it was still alive. He did love most animals, though. He'd only slice that cat up because he wanted to see how it worked. That's why he was so pissed that somebody had killed Barrington. He'd put the little rat in a small cage from the stores and given it some dried rations. Then he'd found it on its back, its belly all mangled. Maybe another rat had gotten to it. Maybe there were rodents on this planet. But more likely Marquez had stuck his knife in Barrington when Segura wasn't looking. Marquez hated him. That little rat never did anybody any harm. It was just a few minutes to the landing pad. He hoped Marquez had everyone suiting up and ready for some serious shooting. The cockpit door opened, and Marquez leaned in. "Where are you putting us down?" "On the landing platform, duh," Segura said. "I know you killed my rat." "I never touched your fucking rat, you imbecile," Marquez said. He paused and leaned forward. "The hell is this?" Segura turned in his seat to look at what Marquez was gingerly holding between his fingers. It was pale and translucent, like a snakeskin that had been shed. Marquez opened it out, like one of those paper dolls little girls used to cut out. "Hey," he said, turning back to guide the Cheyenne toward the colony. "That looks like a little version of a bug." Marquez dropped it like it was on fire. "Oh, Segura, you shithead," he spat. "Your fucking rat, it was infected. The goddamn thing is loose on here." "Well, if it came out of Barrington, it's only going to be a tiny little..." Marquez yelled as something barreled out of nowhere, like a sleek black rocket no bigger than a cat. It fastened onto his face, and Marquez screamed and fell. Segura shouted, "What the fuck? What the fuck?" He had to put down, get his gun, finish the little xenomorph off. But it was as tricky as the rat it had hatched from, and had disappeared, leaving Marquez a twitching, moaning, bloodied mess on the floor of the cockpit. Where the hell were the other two? Segura hollered for them, the colony landing pad coming up, when suddenly he felt something thud against the back of his head. A pain like a dagger pierced his skull and exploded behind his eyes. As Jones watched the Cheyenne lurch and twist and spiral out of control, slamming into the comms tower with a distant rending of metal and a splintering of glass and a bright, fuel-blackened explosion, he realized the objective had changed. They were no longer a retrieval mission. The xenomorph cargo had just gone up with his squad and his dropship. The Cronulla was destroyed. Chad McLaren could do whatever the fuck he liked. Jones was on his own now, and all that mattered was getting off the planet in one piece. He abandoned his stalking of McLaren on the rocky hillside and turned, heading back to the colony buildings. There was one more way off LV-187, and he was sure as shit going to be the one to take it. Chad watched the Cheyenne pile into the comms tower, saw the tower ripple and bend and, with a whine of ruptured infrastructure, begin to topple. The comms deck aflame with the blazing wreck of the dropship embedded in it. He saw Jones emerge from behind a rocky outcrop, only a couple of 100 meters behind him, to turn tail and run for the colony buildings. Maybe he was going to try to save his men, but Chad doubted it. He set off at a run behind the Colonial Marine. The territory was bare and rocky, loose shale making the going slow. It was wet, too, from the storm, and slippery, with pools of dirty rainwater in the uneven terrain. He hadn't seen much beyond the empty landscape. No seas or forests or anything. Some of the area had been quarried out to provide stone for the construction of the colony, maybe. And there were a few flattened paths from heavy vehicles that meant he could move more quickly in Jones's wake, ducking behind rocks and outcrops whenever Jones turned to see if he was being followed. Jones circled around the ridge and picked his way along a cliff's edge, making his way to where he could pull himself up onto the landing platform. Chad realized what he was going to do and followed his route, dragging himself up onto the landing pad just to see Jones running for the New Albion ship, the Victory. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Jones," he called at the top of his lungs. Jones turned and fired off a couple of wild shots from his handgun. "You should have stayed hidden, McLaren. You're going to die on this planet, so there's no reason I can't just kill you myself." He continued on, reached the Victory, and hit the door controls. Chad skidded to a halt and turned on a dime, starting to run full pelt for the colony building doors to the right of the toppled comms tower. He glanced over his shoulder to see Jones staring at him. Then the xenomorph that had been trapped on the ship since it had killed Jerry Bow leapt from the recesses of the Victory, claws outstretched and jaws gnashing as it let loose a hunter's howl. Chad didn't look back again as he heard Jones utter a blood-chilling scream that was abruptly cut off with a gurgling, liquid choke. It was a big one, muscular and taut, and more than 2 meters tall when it came crashing down from the ceiling space, scattering their table and chairs, and sending them all scrabbling backward away from it. Marilyn was the first to react, grabbing for the rifle and letting fly a flurry of pulse bursts, half of which hit the xenomorph and sent it sprawling backward against the wall. She was aware of Chair grabbing Therese and dragging her away, for which she was thankful. If she could pump enough fire into the xenomorph before it could react. The rifle clicked in her hands. She looked at it in dismay and pointed it again. Nothing. "Out of charge," Davis cried. Chair appeared alongside her, handgun outstretched, haphazardly letting off shots at the monster. "Therese," Marilyn said. "Back there, safe," Chair said, pushing another pistol into Marilyn's hands. Safe was a very relative concept, all of a sudden. The xenomorph took hits and spewed acid blood from its wounds, but it seemed to be unstoppable, shrugging off the worst of the damage and crouching, getting ready to leap at them. Then Davis barreled toward it, a brown, furry missile, growling and barking, that slammed into the xenomorph's torso, knocking it off its feet before it clawed at him and tossed him away like a toy. "Don't go!" Therese cried behind her. The sound of her daughter's voice seemed to give Marilyn extra strength. The upturned canteen table was between them and the monster. "The table!" she called out. "Grab it!" Chair frowned, but did as Marilyn bid, the pair of them picking up the table by its top, legs toward the xenomorph. She nodded to Chair, and they both pushed forward with a simultaneous yell, Marilyn angling the table so one of the metal legs hit the surprised alien in the chest, forcing it back against the wall and piercing its dark flesh. It wasn't enough to kill it. Chair and Marilyn ducked behind the tabletop as the xenomorph reached for them. It was trapped and out of range, and weakened by its wound, but only for as long as they had the strength to hold it there. Marilyn risked lifting her pistol, but the creature clawed at it and knocked it out of her hand. Then the canteen doors crashed inward. "How many, Davis?" Chair said through gritted teeth, not daring to take her eyes off the xenomorph pinned to the wall by the table. "2, Davis said. "No, 3. "Shit," Chair said. Shit. This was it, then. This was how it ended. She knew why her sister had died, but she would never get the word out. She would just join the mystery of her death. Another victim of the conspiracy. "Wait," Davis said. "Fuck," moaned Cher. "More?" Then she heard what Davis had heard. Gunfire. Lots of it. And the howling, screeching death rattles of monsters out there in the corridor. She sagged momentarily, then redoubled her efforts, pushing the table against the monster as it screamed and howled at them. Were they saved? Was it in time? And what was that? Under the screams and the gunfire, a man's voice, almost drowned but distinct and strong, and saying a prayer? Augustus Trent strode along the corridor, flanked by his green berets and their camouflage fatigues and Kevlar, as they emptied their projectile rifles into the demons that infested the colony buildings of LV-187. He had never seen the like of these black, skeletal beasts, with their rows of needle-sharp teeth and vicious claws. But they were merely another enemy, and the Royal Marines treated each enemy as the same, inferior, and to be defeated. He could see the fear in the eyes of some of the men and women under his command, and he needed them to be strong in the face of the cadre of filth that hell had seen fit to unleash against them. "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death," Trent called over the sound of gunfire and the death screeches of the monsters, "I will fear no evil." He put his foot on the neck of an injured creature and fired his revolver into its head until it stopped twitching. "For thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff comfort me." They had killed 5 of the things, by his reckoning, and there was some commotion ahead in the double doorway where he could see at least 2 of the beasts crouching. A sign above the door proclaimed it to be the canteen. Trent signaled for his troops to head toward it. "Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of thine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil." 3 Green Berets fell to their knees and killed the 2 creatures by the doorway with bullets, avoiding the corpses which bled acid that smoked and boiled where it landed. Trent nodded his appreciation. "My cup runneth over," he intoned. There was more noise from the canteen, human noise, shouts and screams and... a dog? Trent stepped carefully over the bodies of the creatures and surveyed the scene. 2 women had one of the monsters trapped against the wall with a table, but they were under extreme pressure. There was indeed a dog, which seemed to be guarding a small child in the corner. Trent checked his revolver. "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life," he called loudly as he strode toward them. It was the first time he had taken a proper look at one of the creatures, its bulbous head, its gaping jaws, truly dragged from the mouth of hell. He held up his gun as he approached. "And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." The stricken creature turned its face to him and hissed, opening its jaws. Trent emptied his gun into its head, and it slammed back against the wall, the explosive shells blowing its brains out. The surface bubbled as the acid began to eat through. As the 2 women holding the table slumped to the floor, Trent looked around as his team signaled that the immediate area was clear and secure. "Amen," Augustus Trent said. He holstered his gun. "Now, is someone going to tell me what the fuck is going on here?" "Sir," one of the Marines called, and Trent turned to see a man in the doorway. His troops' guns were trained on the newcomer. He was tall and broad, and looked exhausted. "Chad!" the dog shouted. Trent raised an eyebrow. "Curiouser and curiouser." The man held up his hands. "Thank God you're here." "Correct," Trent said. "You can indeed thank God that we're here." 26. As soon as Chad had cautiously entered the colony buildings, the ruined comms tower burning above him, he heard the gunfire. Abandoning caution, he ran down the corridors as fast as he could, quickly coming across the corpses of the xenomorphs that had been massing to attack the canteen. There he found what he recognized as a troop of Royal Marines and their commander, who introduced himself as Captain Augustus Trent of the HMS God's Hammer. Chad told the captain everything he needed to know about the xenomorphs, expecting the usual barrage of questions and disbelief. But Trent just kept absent-mindedly stroking the scar that ran down his face. "I wondered why the Cronulla was here," Trent said. "That was the ship that the Colonial Marines came from?" Chad said. "What happened to it?" "We did," Trent smiled thinly. "You've met with the landing party. What's their location?" "Dead," Chad said. "Most of them in the dropship that destroyed the comms tower. Their officer was killed on the landing platform." "What happened to him?" Trent said. "Xenomorphs did." "You have a ship, yes?" Marilyn stepped forward, Therese hiding shyly behind her. "I do, ma'am," Trent said, touching the front of his beret. "The finest ship in the service of New Albion." "New Albion?" Chad said. "But the Royal Marines had to be here for the Three-World Empire." "The galaxy is changing, Mr. McLaren," Trent said, "and we must change with it. I, along with my crew, have decided that we are better placed serving the needs of this emergent new force than being the... What was it the commander of the Cronulla called us before he died? Ah, yes. A toothless bulldog. Better than being a toothless bulldog in the service of the Three-World Empire." Trent stood. "We have 3 dropships here. I must go and get patched through to New Albion to apprise them of the situation. That all the trade party you so bravely held this colony for them have lost their lives in service to the new empire." "But you're going to take us with you, right?" Cher said. "You can get us up to your ship and back to New Albion." "Members of my team will remain here for your protection," Trent said. "Please don't worry, ma'am. I do not intend to leave anyone on LV-187. He turned and marched away with 2 of his Marines. Yes, well, Chad thought, that's not the same thing as taking us with you, is it? "I'm so glad to see you," Cher said, giving Chad a long hug that she was too exhausted to break off. "I thought you were dead. Everybody else is." "Do we have any idea how many of these things have been killed?" Marilyn asked. Chad shrugged. "I saw 5 corpses in the corridors, plus the 2 in the doorway and the 1 here. There were 6 in the hold of the dropship that crashed into the comms tower. How many did they kill last night? How many did we?" He rubbed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Fucking place." "Agreed," Chad said. "And the God's Hammer should be more than equipped to do that." He looked up. "Here comes Trent now." "You get through to your bosses on New Albion?" Cher said as Trent walked up to them and pulled up a chair, sitting astride it with his arms over the back. He ignored her and pointed to Chad. "Mr. McLaren, tell me again about the reproductive cycle of these xenomorphs." When Chad had gone through it all again, he noticed 3 of the Royal Marines edging closer, their rifles in their hands. He frowned. "Trent, what's going on?" "You are all being detained temporarily for your own safety." "On what grounds?" Cher said, standing up and bristling. "I'm a citizen of the United Americas." She glared at him. "You're making a very big mistake." "You are, along with Mr. McLaren and the synthetic dog, wanted for questioning on New Albion in connection with a serious breach of a no-fly order." He turned to Marilyn. "Ms. Hamilton and her daughter are citizens of a foreign power which is at war with New Albion. You will all be held here until our operations are complete." "Can't you at least detain us on your ship, rather than here, where those creatures might still attack?" Marilyn said, looking around. "What operations, Trent?" Chad said. "What exactly are your orders?" "Mr. McLaren," Trent said mildly, "you mentioned the existence of a hive. Now where exactly would we find that?" An hour later, the Marines had set up, in the center of the canteen, a field comms unit on which were displayed the various schematic overlays of the colony base. "Can we get life forms readings on here?" Trent asked. "Just patching into the colony mainframe, sir," the Marine at the control said. "Any second now." A fleet of yellow dots appeared on the map. "This concentration is us, here," The Marine continued, pointing to a cluster. Here and here, we have gold and red teams. And these? Trent pointed to a small grouping on the far side of the colony, and then several individual dots scattered around. Xenomorphs, Chad said at his shoulder. I count at least 20? Trent looked at him. And where do we find this queen? We find her, we find the hive, right? Chad studied the schematic. He called Marilyn over and pointed to one of the stationary dots. Where is this? She peered at it. That's the fusion reactor hub. Chad straightened up. Then that's your hive. He looked at Trent. I still say it makes more sense just to nuke the facility from orbit. You could lose a lot of men mopping up 20 xenomorphs in the Queen. You don't know what you're dealing with here. Trent frowned. We are not destroying a viable colony operation along with all the oil and ore that's stored in those tanks. Do you monitor the news, Mr. McLaren? Do you know how scarce a resource oil is, especially out here in the colonies? Profit wins again, Chad said. Fine, Trent. You want to do it the old-fashioned way, I'll help you. But people are going to die, you get that? And I want my friends to be among them. Will you guarantee their safety? I'd be a fool to make that promise, Trent replied. But you have one of the finest bodies of military personnel in the Wayland Isles boiling for a fight here. So I rather fancy our chances against an uncoordinated mob of blood-crazed animals. I've heard that one before, Chad said quietly. It never ends well. Trent smiled. This time you have God on your side, Mr. McLaren. Trent, Chad, and 6 Royal Marines were outfitted in armored ape suits, favored by both Colonial Marines and Weyland-Yutani operatives. At Chad's insistence, the soldiers had Weyland-Yutani ID-23 underslung incinerator units fitted to their NSG-23 assault rifles. He told Trent it was the only way to make certain the eggs were fully destroyed. Trent himself was armed with his Norcom semi-automatic. When Chad asked for a weapon, he was given a basic pulse sidearm. You won't need it, Trent said confidently. My team will handle this. You won't even get your hands dirty. Why only 6? Chad said. We should be taking 3 times that number of personnel. Because we're professionals. Chad turned to the others, Therese hiding from the mask of his suit behind Marilyn. He flipped the face visor and smiled at her. We'll be away from here soon. We're leaving all this behind. Davis trotted over and Chad squatted to talk to him. Be careful, Davis said. You promise me? Chad ruffled his fur. We've got a lot to do, Davis. Neither of us are dying here. Mr. McLaren, Trent said, pulling down his visor. Time for us to roll out. Be safe, Cher said. For all our sakes, Marilyn added. A team of 4 additional Marines escorted the fire team down the corridors until they came to the double doors marked with the nuclear warning stickers. They were locked, and one Marine fixed a low-level magnetic charge, blowing the locks with a precise, muted whoop. Inside was a small, steel-lined foyer with an elevator and a flight of metal stairs. Trent indicated for the fire team to start descending the steps and turned to the 4 Marines. 2 on the doors, the other pair back to the canteen. He looked at Chad. Shall we do this? Chad could think of nothing he wanted to do less. He'd seen xenomorph hives. He'd seen queens. He was normally running away from them, not walking into them. Hitting the night vision switch on his visor, he fell in behind the Marines, slowly descending the stairs. Trent stayed behind him. In the canteen, one of the Marines got the big water boiler working and proceeded to make mugs of tea for everyone. How very English, Marilyn thought, sitting by the observation window, watching the clouds scudding across the sky, while Therese petted Davis. Rain pattered lightly against the window, but it wasn't another storm as bad as last night. Still, she didn't feel as good about this as she should. Why could they not have airlifted them off LV-187 in a dropship? back to their vessel in orbit, and then played their stupid little soldier games. Why did they have to wait here for this to be played out? Chair was helping distribute the tea among the Marines lounging in the canteen, and she brought 2 steaming mugs over to Marilyn. "Milky and sugary. Only way it comes, apparently," she said. Marilyn gratefully accepted the mug and sipped at it. She could sense that Chair was wanting to say something. "What is it?" Chair bit her lip, hesitated, then said, "While everyone was resting, I saw the security camera footage from when Therese found the overmorph." Marilyn put her cup on the table. "Ah. That was the first contact the colony had with the xenomorphs?" Marilyn nodded warily, pondering what she was going to say. They'd been through a lot together, more than most people had to bind them, but still she was not ready for all of this. "How?" Chair said helplessly. Marilyn shrugged. "Luck? Divine intervention? She's stronger than she knows. I ask myself the question every day, and I never get an answer. I just give thanks for it." Chair nodded. "From what Chad told me, once a face hugger attached itself, no force on Earth would get it off. Not without killing the host. As I said, luck," Marilyn said, shrugging again. "She reacts very quickly. As soon as it hits her face, she pulls it off, throws it to the floor, and stamps on it. You've watched the footage. I didn't really know what it was or what it did until Chad explained it properly. But I think she just managed to get it off quickly before it could do what it does." "I'm so glad she did," Chair said, looking over at Therese. "She's one special kid, Marilyn." "You don't know the half of it," she said, following Chair's gaze. The stairs went down and down, deeper than the colony base, into the very rock on which it was built. The reactor had been drilled in deep in case of accidents, but even so, if it went into meltdown, it would still take out most of the place. Eventually, they bottomed out in another foyer, with another set of double doors, except these were open, clawed open, the metal twisted. Chad turned to Trent and held up his hand. "Halt," Trent said on the shortwave radios connecting the fire team. "Okay," Chad said. "If that is a hive in there, you're going to see some very weird shit. There may be drones, smaller aliens. There will definitely be a queen, and she's going to be big. And there will be eggs. I suggest half the team starts torching the eggs, and the rest of us take the queen, if we can." "We don't work in ifs, we work in whens," Trent said. "We're the Royal Marines." "Okay, team, you heard the man. Let's go. And let's tread carefully. And let's kick some xenomorph ass." The Royal Marine operating the ad hoc scanner and comms desk was called Winwick, and she was patiently explaining to Therese what she was seeing on the schematic. "So this is us, here, and over here, we have Captain Trent and Mr. McCarran and the fire team." "Why are their dots smaller?" Therese said. "Because they're on a different level to us. They must be going pretty deep underground." Winwick swiped the map away, and it was replaced by one showing mainly a large circular chamber. "See? The dots are full size now. We're looking at their level only." "What is this dot?" Therese asked. "That's I guess that's..." Winwick glanced at Marilyn. "It's okay. She's seen plenty this last week." "That's a xenomorph, Therese. Maybe the queen they're going to kill." Therese nodded as Winwick swiped their floor back to the top level of the schematic. "And what are these dots here?" Winwick frowned. "Those are..." "Shit." She looked around, shouting at the nearest Marine. "Incoming! We got incoming!"